Om Swastiastu. Hi everybody, how are you doing? I hope you're doing well. So in this next occasion, I'm Putu Inten Leoni with my partner Gede, Nanda, Paramita, Sari. Will explain you about an important materials in a learning grammar, and that is verb complementation with the subtopics verb plus two objects. So this material is very useful for us in a learning grammar. So don't skip this and let's move on to the video. So in this video we are going to explain you four topics. The first one is the direct and the indirect object. The second one is the use of for and to. The third one is the verb that can be followed by two objects. And the last one is the verb that can't be followed by two objects. So let's begin with the first topic. It is about the direct and the indirect objects. So it is important for you to know that some verb can be followed by two objects. The first object we called the indirect object is refers to person or a group of people, and the second object or the direct object is referred to thing. For example, as you can see on the slide, the first example is he gave his daughter a camera for Christmas. So we can see that there are two objects here. The first one is his daughter and the second one is camera. His daughter is the indirect object or the first object, and the camera is the direct object or the second object. We move on to the next example. That is, could you lend me some money? So there's also two objects here. The first one is me and money. So me here is become the first object, which is the indirect objects, and the second is money, which is the direct objects. Okay, we move on to the next slide. It is about the position of the direct and the indirect object. So usually the direct object is always comes after the indirect object, but we can also change the pattern. We can also put the direct object before the indirect object, but we have to add the preposition for or to before the indirect objects. For example, she sent the flowers for me. So in this case, the pattern is we put the direct object first before the indirect object. So we have to add the preposition for or to before the indirect objects. What if both objects are pronouns? So if you see this case, if you see both objects are pronoun in a sentence, it is common to put the indirect object in the last of the sentence, and in non-formal situation, to is occasionally dropped after it. For example, lend them to her. So them and her is the objects in the sentence, which is pronouns, and it is also possible to put the indirect object first. For example, send him some. Next is about the verbs explain, suggest, and describe. So if you found kinda explain, suggest, and describe verbs, we cannot use the pattern indirect object plus direct object. We have to use the pattern with the preposition to or for. For example, please explain your decision to us. The second one is, can you suggest a good cardiologist to me? So here, the good cardiologist and me are the objects. So we not make it with can you suggest me a good cardiologist, but we add the preposition to in it. So we move on to the next slide. It is about the position of for and to. So with many verbs that can be followed by two objects, it is very possible to us to reverse the position of the object if we put for and to in it before the indirect objects. And then it is called a prepositional objects. For example, we can compare the first example and the second example. As you can see on the slide, the first example is I built my daughter a doll's house. So we can compare with I built a doll's house for my daughter. So here is the use or the position if we use for and to in this sentence. We often use this pattern if we want to focus on the objects after for and to, or the indirect object is a lot longer than the direct objects. For example, as you can see on the slide, Jasmine taught music to a large number of children at the school. So we not make like Jasmine taught a large number of children at the school music. Next is about the difference between for and to. So for suggests that the indirect object receives and benefits from goods or services, while to is suggest a transfer of the direct objects and the indirect objects. So the objects that can be used with for are book, build, buy, catch, choose, cook, fetch, find, get, make, pour, order, save. And the object that can be used with to is award, give, hand, lend, over, owe, pass, teach, tell, and throw. Next, this is an exception for some verbs that can be used either for and to. They are bring, live, pay, play, post, read, sell, send, sing, and write. For example, I hadn't got time to visit Anne, so I wrote a letter to her. And we can compare with Anne had broken her wrist and couldn't hold a pen, so I wrote a letter for her. So we can use either for or to in the verbs wrote. Important notes to you that sometimes for and to has a very similar meaning in some situations. For example, he played the piece to me. So we can also use for in the sentence, become he played the piece for me. And the second example is, can you sing that song again to me or to us? And we also can use for in the sentence, become can you sing that song again for us? And that is have a very similar meaning. So that's all my explanation about the direct and the indirect object, and also the use of for and to. For the next topic will be explained by my partner.
Okay, I'm Nanda Paramita. Now I'm gonna show you the next material. It is about some verbs that can have two objects and some verbs that can't have two objects, and some important notes too. Because this double object structure can't be used with all verbs. It only works with certain verbs. So without any further ado, let's get started. Okay, here's a list of common verbs that can be followed by two objects. There are give, send, pass, throw, show, teach, tell, write, sell, lend, want, owe, bring, get, ask, find, make, cook, build, and cost. For examples, can you pass me some sugar, please? The second, I sent them the email. The third, let me get you a cup of coffee. And the next, could you lend me some money? And other verbs are buy, live, promise, and show. And then the next is verbs that can't take two objects. So please remember these verbs cannot be followed by two objects. There are say, suggest, recommend, explain, describe, borrow, push, take, and donate. And then the next thing I'm gonna tell you is some important notes that you must remember. The first one, some verbs that are followed by two objects cannot have their objects reversed with to or for. For example, I ask you a question, not I ask to you a question. The next, tell me something good, not tell to me something good. And last one, I send Zane a postcard, not I send to Zane a postcard, not even I send for Zane a postcard. And then the next is some verbs can only have a second object if this is a prepositional object with to. For example, the first one, please explain your decision to us, not please explain us your decision. The second, she described the situation to me, not she described me the situation. And then other verbs like describe include admit, announce, demonstrate, explain, introduce, mention, say, and suggest. And then the last thing is, some verbs can only have a second object if this is a prepositional object with for. For example, he fixed the car for me, not he fixed me the car. And then I booked a room for him. Other verbs like fix include collect, mend, and repair. Well, that's all about our presentation, and lastly we have some exercises for you to do. It's just 10 questions. You can answer it by replying in the comment sections, and then we will put the answer as well. So thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and have a nice day. Goodbye.